All right, and we are live as I am mid-sip of my very much needed morning coffee. Hello, good morning, if you are in my part of the world, or good evening or good afternoon if you're in another part of the world. It is so nice to meet you and to be here with you today. My name is Maria Wickvila. I am currently in my my husband's office. I don't normally broadcast from here, but um, I've got Tom Cruise behind me from Top Gun Maverick because my husband works for the company that made that movie. So I figured it was a good omen to have Tom behind us to as we shoot towards the highest heights of our admissions process. Okay, so what we are going to talk about today is we're going to talk about essays, but from a slightly different angle because I have found over the years, I've been doing this now for 20 years, and I've found over the years that sometimes folks are thinking so much about like, okay, what is the essay topic at sort of a shallow level that they're not always thinking like, well, why are we even being asked about this? Like, why does the admissions committee even care? Why do they want me to write about this? It seems sort of weird. And so I thought it would be useful if we understand the motivations of the readers on the admissions committee, then that can help us guide what we end up writing and telling them in our essays. Because if we know what they're looking for, then that helps us write more effectively. So, super quick for those of you who might be new around here or new to me. Hi, I'm Maria Wickvila. I am a 2005 graduate of Harvard Business School. I started doing admissions guidance very informally, of course, but as a student there in 2003. So this is now technically my 21st year of helping people get into business school. And I am the founder of ApplicantLab.com. And what is Applicant Lab? Well, basically, I don't know if you've looked at what admissions consultants out there charge. They charge quite a bit to work with you one-on-one to help you get through this very pretty horrific at times, very long and complicated admissions process. They charge quite a bit of money. I actually have not updated, full disclosure, guys, I have not updated the slide in maybe a couple of years. So I think the prices have actually gone up from here. But the idea is that they charge a lot. Now, they should charge a lot. This is this is a lot of work for them. I am not begrudging them for being compensated what this amount. However, I will humbly suggest that it's not the only way for you to get this guidance. This is why I started Applicant Lab. So what is Applicant Lab? Applicant Lab is a DIY platform where I have taken like the download of my brain of those 20 years of advice, and I've created a step-by-step online platform where if you go through my exercises and you watch my videos and you go through the steps, it is the same type of advice that you could get from me if you were working with me one-on-one. But because you're not working with me one-on-one, I don't have to charge you tens of thousands of dollars. The cost of Applicant Lab is $349, which is less than what you would otherwise have to pay, someone like me, for even just 1 hour of time. So I do hope that you check it out. So with that introduction out of the way, let's take a step back and think about, okay, what even is the MBA application process? Yes, you are applying to a school at an institution of higher learning. However, the MBA application process is not an academic exercise. Yes, you're applying to an academic institution, but it is not an academic exercise. It's not based on solely on your academic strengths. It's not about showing that you're a very academic person. It's not about using big, fancy, highfalutin, multi-syllabic words in your essays. At the end of the day, the MBA application process is actually a marketing exercise, and the person that you are marketing yourself to is the school, the consumer of this marketing exercise. You are the product, and the consumer is the business school that is looking to accept its next class. So the more you understand the needs and priorities and stresses, in some cases, that the admission staff are under, the more we can think about, okay, so what does this mean for how we're going to tailor our messaging and how we present ourselves through these essays. So it might be useful, actually. I think a lot of folks don't actually perhaps realize that when they hit submit, like, okay, who ends up even reading my application in the first place? So we've got sort of 3 buckets here. A lot of readers are often professional AdCom members. These are the folks where if you go to the school's admissions website, you might see like a little pictures of the individuals, or if you go to the school's admissions YouTube page, they're the people who are giving the videos. They are probably coming here on GMAT Club's YouTube channel quite a bit. So for those folks, what are sort of their backgrounds? Number one, this is their full-time job. This is all they do. Usually their background paths, and of course you can have all kinds of paths into admissions, but it tends to fall into a couple of different buckets. One of the more common buckets is that these are folks who used to work in recruiting, that is hiring, for the big MBA feeder companies like the investment banks and the management consulting companies. So frequently they used to help people get into those companies, and now they're just helping people get in at a slightly earlier phase in the process. Oftentimes, they themselves are graduates of an MBA program, or perhaps they're graduates of another school within the university. Let's say the School of Education, or even a humanities type of school. The next group are the seasonal readers. These are folks who have other lives and other activities that take up their time throughout most of the year, but for a few months out of the year, this is a part-time job. When I say part-time job, I don't, some of them actually do it part-time, but it's more like it's part-time for like 6 months out of the year. All they do is read. and, then, and then the rest of the time they have other activities that take up their time. So who are these seasonal readers? Sometimes they are former full-time admissions officers who wanted a change of pace, didn't want that full-time employment anymore. Sometimes they have liberal arts backgrounds. Like I said before, they might be folks who went through the English literature, the creative writing program, or all kinds of backgrounds, but folks who are sort of looking to supplement their income on the side. So they need to be able to have pretty good critical thinking skills and ability to analyze writing pretty well. And the thing about the seasonal readers is that they tend to return year after year. And this is good news for all of us because it means that they're very well trained, right? The first couple of years that you're doing this, it's a bit of a learning curve, but the schools that hire the seasonal readers to come back year after year, those folks are usually pretty knowledgeable. And then many schools also use current MBA students, second year students. It is more common to use the second year students as interviewers for admissions, but some schools do actually use the second year students as readers as well. And what they do is they are also well trained, but they might be used a little bit earlier in the process. So they might be involved in that first read, kind of like a first look through. But the second year students will probably not be involved at that last decision conversation, right? They're not going to be necessarily, I would, assume, invited to that final decision where it's down to the wire. We have to make these offers. Who are we going to make the offers to? But I think that they help the schools who have large volumes at least weed through those initial applications, and at least maybe, discard some of the immediately unpromising ones and flag, or indicate like, hey, maybe this one's kind of has some potential. I did want to note, who is it not? The person who is reading your application, for the most part, is not like a professor, so you don't need to worry about impressing them with big words. And it's also not, I don't know if you know who this Kevin O'Leary guy is. He's on a show called Shark Tank. He's this kind of mean business expert guy, and I think sometimes we think, well, it's business school, and so therefore a business person is reading my essay, but that's not who it is. So, who are the readers' stakeholders? One thing that's really important to know is that admissions offices don't exist in a vacuum where they don't report to anyone and they can just do whatever they want, la la la, and just skip through the fields of daisies. And no, actually, admissions officers are under a tremendous amount of pressure from a ton of different stakeholders within their ecosystem and within their lives. Some of those stakeholders, some of the more important ones, are here. First of all, they are trying to think about currently, okay, the school. They're trying to think about, okay, when you arrive at the school, while you're there at the school, what are your future classmates going to think about, right? Like when they assemble a class and they bring those 200, 300, 900 people to the campus, we're hoping that there's going to be a certain level of alchemy, or at least synergy, or people getting along and helping each other and being nice to each other, right? I want to think about, who are you as an applicant going to be when you are on my campus community a year and a half from now. They also need to be a little bit beholden to professors. There are stories of people that I've spoken with, admissions officers, who at times have said, like, look, we've had when we have like perhaps let someone in who maybe didn't have quite the level of, let's say, English fluency that was needed to participate fully in the class, or someone who really just really struggles with these quantitative concepts. Sometimes professors will actually go to admissions and just be like, look, just so you know, like, please don't let people in like this because they really are dragging down the rest of the class, and it's very frustrating for me. Um, and then the school is also weighing large on the admissions reader because they're also trying to think about beyond your years on the campus. Who are you going to be? The main one being, what will the school's brand reputation be as a result of letting you in now? So when they're letting you in now, and if you've seen some of my other webinars, especially my resume webinar, they're not thinking necessarily about who are you today. They're thinking about who do you have the potential to be 5, 10, 30, 50 years from now, such that if you are ever in the news for any reason that might merit mentioning the business school you went to, hopefully it will be a good news article and you will be someone that other people within your little sphere or ecosystem, wherever you end up working in, will respect you. And they'll respect you and they'll think, oh, that person went to Ross. Wow, Ross is a great school. And that's how the school's brand develops and gets stronger. They also, by the way, need to think about whether or not you'll donate later on in the future, but that's sort of a side note. Okay, and then the other big one that I put here in its own little rectangle because it is such an important one are the recruiters. Recruiters, recruiters, recruiters. See those dollar signs? When you look at the post MBA graduation salaries, they can be pretty eye watering and pretty big numbers, right? Well, those recruiters are paying money for a reason. They're paying money because they're paying the graduate this amount of money because they're hoping to extract this amount of value from that same graduate. And so when the admissions readers are reading, they're also thinking about, okay, if we put this person in front of one of our corporate recruiters, is that recruiter going to be like, oh, I am so glad I came all the way here to Hanover, New Hampshire. It's 4 hours away from Boston. I drove all the way here to talk, but man, was it worth it because I met some great talent today, right? So the most common essay topics, and I apologize, I normally like to do little animations and we're trying a new system here. So that's why it's like, lots of information visually at once, but I'm going to try to walk you through it so it's not like eyeball assault. So here, the reason I have these little rectangles appear under the existing, you know, upcoming community and then the recruiters is that of all the stakeholders, these are the two that I think weigh most heavily on admissions readers. And that is what inspires a lot of the essay questions. So, what are the most common essay topics that you are likely to see? Regardless of which school or schools you end up applying to, you are likely to encounter at least one essay somewhere in this bucket. You know, sometimes I get questions from people who say, oh, Maria, I went to the Applicant Lab website and I saw the list of schools that you quote unquote support, that you give essay advice for, but I'm applying to the University of Melbourne in Australia. I'm applying to some of, like, it's not on the list, so can Applicant Lab help me? And the fact is, I actually have advice, general MBA essay advice, so that, you know, it covers all of these, so that basically it doesn't really matter what school you're applying to. I got you covered because most schools will ask some permutation of combination of these questions. So let's go through the list. One of the most common questions you will be asked is around your career vision. What are your goals for your career? Close behind is, why do you need an MBA to reach those goals? After all, if you say, well, my goal is to become a neurosurgeon, okay, we don't, let me check. No, we don't really have any brain surgery electives. Sorry. Right. So, first of all, tell me, where do you want to go with your career? And then, cool, that's a great plan. I love it. Great story, bro. But why do you then need the MBA to get there? And why our school specifically? Right? I've read some essays where some people have made an amazing case for why they should go to a completely different school. because they talk about all the things they want to get from the MBA. And I'm like, well, that school doesn't really have that stuff. What you should be looking at Duke, right? Like Duke's really where you want to go. So you want to make it clear that you know where you want to go, why you need the MBA to get there, why this specific school to get there. And then also, what will you contribute to our campus community? Once you're here, what are you going to do for us? The next one is often a leadership example. This can be phrased in lots of different ways. As we get a little bit further, I'll show you some examples. But at its core, it might have a different skin. It might have a different sort of flavoring around it. But when you get to the core, you're like, oh, it's a leadership essay. They put different words around it, but that's ultimately what they're trying to get at, is a leadership example. Another thing they want to see is that you have a growth mindset. This can come in lots of different ways. One of them is they might ask about a time you failed. They might ask you to talk about weaknesses that you have. Some of them just flat out say, like, are you a curious person? Tell us about things tell basically. They don't use the term growth mindset, but they're a little bit more overt about it. And then the other one, and this one has become more common in the recent years, is this example. Tell us an example of a time that you have helped create an inclusive environment. And we will get into all of this in a second. So let's tackle the first three first. Career vision, why MBA, why our school, and contribution to community. This is the most common. Sometimes you get asked this all in one essay question. Sometimes it gets split out across multiple essay questions. Sometimes it's an essay question. One of these might be an essay question, and then another one, they'll still want the same information, but they might ask it inside a little text box inside the application form, which, by the way, I don't know if you're watching this right now. We are recording this in late July, but even if you stumble across this recording at any point, if you haven't already started going through the application forms of your schools, try to do that sooner rather than later, because they often have little hidden boxes in them that, it's not just like your name and address. It'll be like little boxes. So anyway, the point is most schools ask some variation of this, combinations or permutations of this. This is also referred to more in the European programs as the statement of purpose. So if you hear me ever say the statement of purpose, or even S.O.P, if I'm being extra shorthanded, this is what I'm talking about. It's these three topics combined. So let's look at some examples of them. So I know this is probably pretty small on your screen, and I don't have time to necessarily stop and read them all. So maybe you can come back to this video later. You can pause it and read at your leisure. But what I wanted to do with this slide is sort of highlight, with the green lines, I'm trying to highlight, like, okay, here are the why our school, right? Why Stanford? How will your Stanford experience help you realize your goals? How do you plan to use the Wharton MBA? How will the Booth MBA? Why do you feel Kellogg is best suited to you? Et cetera, et cetera. And then similarly, the word aspirations, future professional goals, immediate long-term post-MBA goals, specific goals you aim to achieve, career goals, et cetera, et cetera. So, by the way, I thought this was funny. As I was putting this slide together, I got a little bit of a chuckle, because if you notice, I know that if you're just starting your MBA search process, you might think to yourself, well, I'm just going to sort of lump Booth and Kellogg together as the same, essentially the same school, right? They're both in Chicago. They're both really highly ranked, but they have such different cultures. And I really got a chuckle last night looking at the differences of these. They're both asking their S.O.P question, right? But the Booth one is like, no nonsense. How will it help you achieve your immediate and long-term goals? Boom, out of there. And then Kellogg they have this really nice little preamble about intentionality is a key aspect of what. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is such a great indicator of, like, you can even tell a little bit about the culture of a school and even how they ask the question. So I thought that was delightful. Both schools are delightful. They're just different. So, by the way, if you do sign up for Applicant Lab, which I hope you do check it out, by the way, there is a free trial, so you can see a little bit of my advice for free. One of the reasons I have you do the career vision and why MBA stuff first, right? If you notice, the to-do list is off on its own. So really, the first real working modules I have you do are the career vision and why MBA. I don't lump them under essay advice, which comes over here in these later steps. And sometimes folks want to skip this part, or they want to sort of skip rush through it as fast as possible, or they're like, well, why are you making me do this so early? And the reason is, if you've noticed above, almost every school wants to know about this. And so it is so important that it's really the only essay topic that I have broken out into its own separate set of exercises, because it is that important. And even if you encounter a school that doesn't ask this as an essay, they will ask you about it in the interview. So you need to have this is like the number one part that you need to have down solidly. The other reason I do this first is because honestly, your career vision and why MBA reasons are going to be the same essentially from school to school. Obviously, the specifics for why our school within why MBA will be different. But you're not going to say for one school, I mean, you could, but I don't recommend it at all. You're not going to say for one school, oh, I want to major in finance and I want to take the investment banking elective. And then for another school, I want to major in brand management and, take the consumer research elective. Like, what? That's so because your rationale for why you want to go to the school is going to be the same across all schools, I have you do it first before you even jump into the other essays. The other reason I have you do this first is because you often have to do research or homework to find out if your career vision is a solid one, to find out, does this school that I'm interested in even offer an entertainment and media club conference? Do they even have something that I'm looking for? Right. Um, so for that reason, because oftentimes when people encounter this module, and as you go through the module, you hopefully I make you realize, like, oh, whoa, I actually need this reason to be pretty tight, but I don't really know what a product marketing manager does. Maybe I should look into that. So that's why I also have you do it first. And so here's a quick mini screenshot of what the career vision module. So I have a fun little quiz at the front just to kind of warm you up. And then we've got long-term vision, post-MBA job, and your career transitions. And then in the why MBA, why is the MBA the missing ingredient? I have a bunch of exercises to make you think through, okay, what am I going to say for why MBA, why now, and what my contributions will be. So stakeholders, how do the stakeholders figure into the asking of the statement of purpose? Again, I apologize for everything on the slide being everything everywhere all at once on this slide. But I don't know if you guys can see my little cursor moving. But if we start with the career vision, in particular, the main stakeholder that is being considered on the career vision is the corporate hiring managers, the recruiters who come to campus, who are going to hire you, really 2 years from now, right? They're thinking ahead to the recruiters a year and a half, 2 years from now, who are going to come and hire you. And so when they are reading the career vision part of your S.O.P, they are thinking to themselves, okay, just like how you're putting yourself in the shoes of the admissions officer is putting themselves in the shoes of the recruiter. And they're thinking, okay, what will our recruiters in banking, technology, consulting, what are they going to think about this specific candidate if we put this candidate in front of them? Right? Are they going to be happy that they came to our campus and that they paid for the wine and hors d'oeuvres and all the stuff? Like, are they going to say, wow, this was totally worth it? We unearthed some real gems. We cannot wait to have these people join our company. And as a side note, this matters so much that, in fact, in some schools are very open about this. That they will, in fact, the admissions staff, if they're a little confused about someone's career vision, they will actually go to the career services office and say, "Hey, I've got a candidate right now who does blah blah blah. Is I don't know, an aerospace engineer, and they're saying that they want to go into this other thing. Like, have we been able to place someone? How does that make sense?" So sometimes career services will, in fact, weigh in on the admissions decision depending on what that career vision is. And then the second big stakeholder that oftentimes is considered when someone is reading the statement of purpose is the contribution to our community, the existing student community at the school, right? So if you're attending a 2-year program, when you get there, there will be second year students and then your fellow first year students. And then your second year, there will be your fellow second year students and then the incoming first year students, right? So the schools are they're trying to imagine who you're going to be on the campus, right? Like if you had sort of like a crystal ball and I'm looking at this person's application and all right, when they finally show up and they spend a year or 2 years here, what are they going to be like? The schools do not want people who have a taking mindset, right? Are the other students going to be glad that we let you in? Are they going to be excited? Are they going to say like, wow, you know what? When I went to Haas, I met some of the most amazing other people. They helped me so much. You hear this a lot from business schools, current business school students. You'll hear stories like, I was interviewing for a management consulting job and I was sitting in the waiting room, and the person, my classmate who was ahead of me, came out and whispered to me like, "Hey, the case that they did was on blah 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 blah. Blah. So like just a heads up." Or like, "Look, I got asked a really hard question about whatever, so just be ready for that." And so a lot of times business school students will talk about how generous their classmates are. Or, someone will say, "I was trying to get into venture capital and my classmate who worked in venture capital set up a coffee chat for me with someone, a partner at their firm." Things like that. You hear these stories a lot. And that's not by accident. That's not some freak coincidence. It's because the admissions officers are looking to accept people who are those sorts of people, right? That it just sort of comes naturally to you to be someone who contributes, as opposed to simply thinking, well, what's in it for me? Right? I cannot wait to join the finance club, and the finance club will get me a job in finance, and I will benefit all by myself, and I will not contribute a darn thing to anyone. Good luck, suckers. No, that's not who they want to admit. Are there people who get accepted? Sure, but that's because they somehow faked it in the application process and they fooled the admissions reader. But they want people who are givers, who are generous with their time and their expertise and their contacts. And you think about it, it makes sense because after all, if you are going to business school and you show up and no one else there is helpful, and you go to someone and you're like, "Hey, I'm really interested in brand management and you used to work in that. Like, could we get lunch? Like, could you tell me about?" And they're like, "Nah, I'm too busy. Leave me alone." Like, what? That's going to be a huge disappointment for you. So ask yourself, what's the sort of person? This is one of, spoiler alert, one of the little mini exercises I have in the applicant lab. Ask yourself, what sort of person am I hoping to meet in business school? And then whatever it is, hopefully they're a generous person. And now you have to prove that you are equally someone who is generous, or who has something to contribute to the community, who's going to give to others instead of just take. Because it's an expense. Like the more pressing or more relevant spoiler alert is that this degree is expensive. And so if you're going to take out those loans, it's worth it, but it's a scary amount of money to take out. So if you're going to take out those loans, you would want the other people to be givers. So you have to show that, oh, that's right, that you're also a giver. So what are some main takeaways for the statement of purpose essay? As you can imagine, I could do several hours of this, and I've got a ton of stuff in Applicant Lab. But I thought, okay, what are the two big takeaways? If we think about who the stakeholders are, you want to make it clear in your statement of purpose that your career vision is a realistic one. That is, that you don't want them to take your file down the hallway to career services and say, well, can this person get this job? Right? If you are very, very new to the MBA admissions process, I have a few harsh truths. If you don't have a finance background, you will probably not get a private equity job or a VC job immediately out of school. You might have to do a couple. You can eventually get there if you want, but immediately out of school, very difficult. Not everyone who wants to get a job in management consulting does. It ebbs and flows, but same thing with like, just because you see a job or a salary level on the career report doesn't mean that every student at the school has an equal shot at getting that job, right? Especially the finance jobs, because they really do look for previous experience, like the PE types of jobs especially. So if you don't have any, you're like, I am a professional figure skater, but I want to go to business school to change my life, and I want to work in private equity immediately after business school. Don't say that because it's not possible, at least not immediately. So you don't want them here. My sort of take on this is it's hard enough to get into business school. There are so many other challenges and obstacles and pitfalls, and why make it harder on yourself by presenting a career vision that might be the thing that kind of gets you like, oh, there are so many other reasons for, if you're going to get rejected, have it be a rejection on something that, like, you're like, okay, fine, I admit my GMAT score was like super low, okay, I get it, but don't have this be the reason. This is fake. You have no idea where your life's going to go in a few years. None of us do. And then the other one is, and this is a stakeholder that occurred to me as I was putting together this slide, you also want to prove that not only are you the sort of person that when I come to your campus, I'm going to contribute, but also to the extent that you could give those contributions to campus to any school, why do you want to come to our school? Because it's really a lot. There's a figure called yield that matters a lot to schools, and that is the percentage of people who get accepted who then actually enroll in the school. And it's really, really sad when an admissions reader spends all this time and energy and they read the stuff and they do the interview and they meet in committee and they decide in the committee to accept you, and then you're like, nah, I was never really into you. You were just my safety school or whatever it is, right? Like, ugh, that's devastating. So up front, you need to show them that you are actually interested. The why our school piece, you need to show that you're interested by actually showing evidence of real research into the program instead of just saying, I want to go to an MBA that will teach me general management and negotiations, and therefore, thanks. No, you have to mention their specific offerings and do other things to show that you actually care about that school. Moving on to the essay topic of leadership. I'm going to take a little leadership moment myself, just take a sip of coffee because my throat's a little dry. I will be back in 2 seconds. Hold on. Thank you. See, the caffeine helps me be a better leader, I promise. Okay, so what are some examples of the leadership essays that you might get? Okay, describe a time when you made a difference in your community or with an individual. Which experiences have shaped who you are, how you invest in others, and the kind of leader you want to become. Oh, this, you know what? I think the software sort of moved some of the lines around. Think about times you've created a positive impact. It should go under it. Whether yeah, when you've created a positive impact, whether in professional, extracurricular, academic, what was your impact? What made it significant to you or others? So this is what the reason I was trying to underline this is that you might say like, Maria, uh, I was asked a question about a time I made a difference, and you don't have advice for it in applicant lab, and I'm like, I do. It's a leadership question. Making a difference is about being a leader because people who aren't leaders never make a difference. They sit back, they do the bare minimum, they keep their heads down, and which is great, but they're not leaders. And so I'm not criticizing people who live that way, but those people aren't leaders. And so words like the words you want to be on the lookout for are things like made a difference. Um, oh yeah, sorry, these got all messed up on the. They weren't like this, I promise. How you invest in others, right? What kind of leader do you want to become, right? Investing in other people is something that leaders often have to do. You cannot get wherever it is you want to get to, you cannot get there 100% alone. You're probably going to need other people to help you. Whether you're at a very big company or you're at your own startup, you're going to need other people, right? So, one good way to get other people to follow you as a leader is to invest in them and show them that you care about them. So, it's a well hidden leadership essay in terms of that phrasing, but it's still leadership. And then things like positive impact, words like impact, um, making a difference, all those words, it's leadership. It's just a leadership essay, just in a different fancy wrapper. So what are the stakeholders that are in the admissions readers' minds? Like, why do they even ask these leadership essays? Well, the first bucket are, again, the recruiters. Because the recruiters are thinking to themselves, okay, if I am going to spend all of this money hiring, the whatever the post MBA graduation salary, plus the signing bonus, plus the whatever, it's a lot of money, right? Which I'm cool with spending as an employer. I'm totally fine with spending that much money if this person is, of course, going to generate more value. Right? However much money you're getting paid, you have to generate more value than that for the employer to continue employing you. So if we're going to spend all of this money hiring this person, what are they going to do for us? Right? How can we be confident or hopeful that they will be able to have that amount of impact such that they earn their keep, for lack of a better way of putting it, that they earn their keep, basically. So we want people, if we just wanted people who were like the good, well-behaved foot soldiers, where you say, go do it, and they do it. And, edit this document, and they edit it. Great. But we're not going to go to an MBA program for that, right? They come to an MBA program looking to hire people who have leadership traits. Because leaders are people who don't just sit back and say like, "Oh man, I wish someone would do something about that thing, but oh well, I'm not going to say anything." Right? Like no, that's why they're hiring you to be the person who's like, "Hey, we need to do this and it needs to get done and here's how we're going to do it." So, they want to make sure that you're a good leader because they don't want the recruiters to be disappointed with you if they hire you and then they come back a year later and they're like, "Yeah, we hired 6 of your graduates last year, but 2 of them are just we had to yeah, it didn't really work out." So, right? Like cuz they sometimes they get feedback from recruiters. It also benefits the school's brand and reputation. So, the admissions officer's brain is thinking, "Okay, so when this person goes out into the world, our school's name is going to be associated with that person for the rest of their lives. And are they going to be the sort of person that is going to make us look good by comparison?" And the way to do that, at a minimum, try to stay out of jail. Hot tip. That tip is free, ladies and gentlemen. Stay out of jail. Um, but on a broader level, right? Are you going to go out and like I said earlier, are you going to join McKinsey or Amazon or Goldman Sachs? And are people going to say like, "Wow, that person is great. Where did they go to school again? Oh, yeah, they went to Wharton. Oh, yeah. Wharton grads they're all great. You can always count on them to just take whatever it is, right? The school's reputation they're basing their reputation on you. They're basically placing a bet on you. Um, so how do you show sometimes I talk about this, by the way, as a side note, and people will say like, "But Maria, that's why I want to go to business school. I want to go to business school so that I can become a leader because I'm not one now, but I think maybe I could be. I never have been before though." But that's what the business school is going to transform me into a leader. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. At least not the elite schools. The very elite schools are looking for people who are already leaders. And why is that? Because down here, this little green box, that was originally in my file a little arrow. Uh, so past actions, arrow. Oh, the arrow goes this way. The past actions are an arrow to indicate future actions. The best way to prove that you are going to be a leader is to show them that you already have been a leader, even if that scope of influence has been pretty small, because you're probably pretty young in your career. So, what's my main takeaway for the leadership essay? In the leadership essay, there are two big things I want you to focus on: showing what you did, just you, first person, I, and how you did it. How you did it matters more than what you did. Because what you did, let's say you tell a story about, "I had to do a cloud migration at my company. And so I set up the servers and I did the database stuff and I was there." You will never have to work on that project again, probably. But as a graduate of a top business school, you will have to be a leader over and over again. You might never do you might do cloud the rest of your career. You might never touch a cloud server again the rest of your life. What's the one constant? The one constant is you will need to work with people and you will need to be a leader. It doesn't matter what, there might not even be cloud database. Who knows? Like the cloud might not exist in 10 years because it's all implanted directly in our brains because we don't know where technology is going. And the same applies. It doesn't even have to be a technology job, right? Like I was a brand manager selling this brand of coffee. And so I came up with an analysis that showed whatever, like you will never work on that project again. So don't focus on the what you did. Tell me how you did it, especially emphasizing those interpersonal strengths that even if you never sell another cup of coffee again in your life or touch another cloud server, show me that you have those interpersonal strengths that are going to be useful no matter where you go in your life going forward. So focus on the how you did it. How did you ask that person to stay late? And how did you convince them to take a chance on you? And how did you persuade that person to not do that thing you didn't want them to do? And then going back to the point about what you did, one of the biggest mistakes I often see on these leadership types of essays are, "I was a member of a team that raised a lot of money for charity, and we had a fundraiser, and we went to blah, 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 and we put posters on the campus." Cool. Great. Here's why that's suboptimal. We are not applying to business school. So if you tell a leadership story where you were a member of a team and the team did something amazing, remember, the team's not applying to business school. The team is not going to be hired, right? When that Goldman Sachs recruiter is grilling you, they're not going to say, "Okay, so we're thinking about hiring you and the team. that team that you did that fundraiser for in college 6 years ago, like, where are they? Because what we want all of you to get. No, so you have to show if it was a team thing, which most good leadership stories involve a team by definition, um, then think about what did I do within the team, right? Sometimes people write these amazing stories, and I'm like, well, you actually made the other person on your team seem like I want to talk to that person, right? Like, so think about what did I do, and really parse out how would this have been different. How would the outcome have been different if someone else had been in that role instead of me? That's how we can start to think about how do we distill what is our own unique leadership style. All right, the next topic, the growth mindset, aka a failure or a weakness. Here are a few of these. These have become, this past year, these have started not showing up as much. They used to be much more popular. But here are some, and again, the lines are a little bit weird, but you know what? You are an adaptable leader. So you're cool with the fact that these lines are like not cool because you're like, I'm smart. I can figure it out. So what are we, what have we got for examples here? Okay. Curiosity can be seen in many ways. Please share an example of how you have demonstrated curiosity and how that has influenced your growth. So this is a growth, this is a growth essay. It has the trappings of curiosity, and so unfortunately, you're gonna have to force a curiosity angle into it so that you're answering the question. But the bigger focus here is how it influenced your growth. How has your growth been influenced, right? The next one, consider a situation where you failed to achieve your objectives. How did you handle failure? What did you learn about yourself and or your interactions with others in the situation? So again, when did you fail? And then what did you learn about yourself? This idea of maybe things don't always go your way. They, you know, Another spoiler alert for Maria. Things rarely go our way all the time in life for anyone. I know. Isn't that a bummer? Ugh, I hate that. Um, 0 out of 10 do not recommend when things don't go my way. But actually, when things don't go our way, it can actually be an amazing opportunity to learn, right? It can be that kick in the backside that says, "Whoa, you know what? I need to improve something. I need to change how I'm doing this. I need to get better. I need to learn a little more, huh?" So that is sort of at the core of what is at these growth examples, even if they call it a failure, or they might say, "What are some of your weaknesses?" Ultimately, what they're looking for is, do you have this growth mindset? So the stakeholders for the failure growth essays, same, it's the recruiters and the school's brand reputation. They are more interested in who you're going to be going out into the world because if there's one thing, the one thing that is constant is change, right? I've been doing admissions now for 20 years. Do you know that even 5 years ago, did anyone talk about AI in a single essay? Nope. Maybe one person, and that was like a fringe, like, AI, what's that? Now everyone's using AI in the rest, right? Like, just everything changes. And anyone 5 years from now, we might not be doing AI anymore. We might be, I don't know, training dolphins to do our work for us. Who knows where the world's going to go? But no matter where it goes, we're going to have to be constantly learning, and we're going to fail at first, maybe. I This is a very minor side note, but I am terrible with Slack. I know that all you young kids, you use the Slack and the Slack. For some reason, I miss the things on Slack. Anyway, so like, oh my gosh, I need to adapt. It's a very minor story of adapting, but still, I am willing to be open and say I just can't figure out. I'm very bad with Slack. Um, so, but you know what? I need to evolve. I need to get better at it. Whether it's a new technology or climate change, let's say you're a real estate investor. Climate, Miami real estate for the past few years has been a great investment. Is it going to be a great investment in 30 years if the ocean levels rise? Maybe not. We are always going to be having to learn. We are always going to have to grow. And oftentimes failure can be our best teacher, as unpleasant as it is in that moment. So in terms of the stakeholders, why do the recruiters care about this? The recruiters want people who have that growth mindset because the recruiters know. They're like, I don't know exactly what I'm going to have you doing for me 3 years from now, but I know it's probably not something that is the exact same as how you do it today. So they want to know that you have a growth mindset, and also the school's reputation. So that way you'll continue to evolve. And also the ability to admit failure is something that actually, it's not a weakness. It's not a weakness to admit that you have weaknesses. So if people are working with you and you say to them like, "Look, I am so sorry that I dropped the ball on this. It will not happen again." That makes people trust you because there's no such thing as a perfect person. And so people who are willing to admit their mistakes and admit their weaknesses, that actually makes for a healthier team environment, no matter what the team is. And therefore, it's less likely that, what's the opposite of someone who has that level of humility, right? It's someone who's very arrogant, someone who's like, my way or the highway. I know better than everyone. I'm so much smarter than all the rest of you. Gross. Maybe that worked, I think, in previous generations, but I think increasingly we're in an increasingly connected world, and I don't know. It's not going to fly as much as it used to. But there's another stakeholder here that is not often part of the essays, but the professors. Professors are pretty passionate about what they do. A lot of these professors with their PhDs in business, frankly, they could probably be making a little bit more money if they were in private sector, right? In the private sector. So the fact that they choose to be professors is because they want to teach. They want to see that light bulb moment in your head. They want to see you put those little pieces together and the hamster starts running in the wheel in your cranium and you have that aha moment. That's what teachers live for. My parents were not professors, but my parents were both public high school teachers. That moment where the kid finally gets it, man, that makes up for a lot. So professors want to know, is this person going to sit in my class and be engaged with the coursework and the material and say like, oh my gosh, like, oh, I get it. I'm putting this together. I'm doing my homework. I'm doing the assignments. I'm doing the readings. I'm coming to class and I'm engaging. And I'm here to learn. Because sometimes at some schools in particular, some schools are pretty strict about class attendance. HBS is very, very strict. The doors get closed right at the time that the class starts, and sometimes they're even locked, so you can't come in, or you can come in, but then you get a difficult time for it. So anyway, the professors themselves, right? Like they want you to be engaged. They want you to improve as a result of attending the school. And if you're someone who is curious and if you're someone who's like, yeah, I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly improving, then you're more likely to be the person who sits in class and is like, okay, teach, let's do it. Let's go, professor. Teach me data analytics and macroeconomics. Let's go. And so the professors also they're not the main stakeholder in the failure growth essay, but I think it is. I think that they are somewhere in the back of readers' minds. So what's my main takeaway for these growth/failure essays? One of my biggest ones is just really be authentic and be honest. Don't try to cover it up, right? Don't say something like, well, I guess I failed this one time, but it's because I was on a team and Kevin was the one who dropped the ball. So really, it was Kevin's fault. The team failed, but it's just because, this other person on my team really blew it. Nuh-uh. Not good. It has to be a time where you failed, where your mistake, your weakness was the reason that something went south, right? So don't try to cover it up. Don't blame another person, or don't make this a humble brag. An extreme and exaggerated example of this would be like, one of my biggest weaknesses in communicating with others is that I'm just so much more intelligent than they are that they sometimes have a hard time following me. So I've had to really adapt no. We see what you're doing. Remember way at the beginning of this presentation where I started talking about the backgrounds of these readers? A lot of them have been reading for years and years and years and years. You're not going to get away with it. Don't think, like, no, it's so obvious. And again, the best way when in doubt, put yourself in the admissions officer's shoes. The best way to ask yourself, like, okay, am I being authentic enough? Am I saying what I think they might want to hear? Just put yourself in their shoes. It's empathy 101. Do you like it when a leader of any sort is like, oh yes, my biggest weakness is that I'm such a hard worker that it's embarrassing for everyone else on my team because I'm just so much better than they are, and that's my weakness? Like, do you like it when people do that? No. You like it when people are open and upfront and they're like, you know what? I dropped the ball. I am so sorry. This is on me, guys. Right? You like that more. I like that more. They like that more. So you can be that person in your essays by speaking authentically about a failure or something that you messed up. Here in this essay. This is how you show that you're that sort of open person. The final major essay topic, inclusivity. Um, so please describe a tangible example that illuminates your experience promoting an inclusive environment. And then this long one here, this is from CBS. It mentions the underline is supposed to go in a different place, but anyway, created an inclusive environment, mitigating bias and prejudice, managing intercultural dialogue. Tell us about a time when you were challenged around one of these 5 skills. Describe the situation, the actions you took, and the outcome. So inclusivity, the stakeholders, again, the recruiters and the school's brand reputation. They're thinking about, are you going to be someone who 15 years from now is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because one of your employees is suing you for creating a toxic work environment because you treated them very poorly because they were a different gender, they had a different sexual orientation, they had a different race. Are you going to get right? Are you going to be someone who has a really bad reputation and embarrasses the school as a result? Are you going to be someone that an employer is going to regret hiring? Right? What if we hire this person and they are very intolerant of people who aren't exactly like them? Right? What if we hire that blue blood Ivy League kid, the 7th generation, Harvard student, and we have them work with a first gen student, someone who was a first gen person from a lower income background? Are they going to be like, oh, you don't deserve this job, right? You didn't earn this job the way I earned this job. Oh, gross, yikes. So those are the sorts of things that employers want to avoid. And because employers want to avoid it, schools also want to avoid it, right? So you have to show that you're someone who can work with others from different backgrounds, that you're not just like, yep, I only work with people whose name who have hyphenated last names and whose first name is Maria. Like, whoa, okay. You have to show that you can get along with a lot of different types of people. And then here, this is also very important for the campus community while you're there. If you spend even 2 seconds looking at the student profiles page for any one of these business schools, they will often have tremendous amounts of diversity. I'm starting to hate that word because now it's been overused, but they really do. And diversity in the purest sense of lots of different people. People from all kinds of different countries, all kinds of different professional backgrounds, right? You're going to have a teacher, you're going to have a rocket scientist, you're going to have a doctor. You're also going to have a lot of management consultants and bankers. But aside from those, you're also going to have all kinds of different people from all over the world and backgrounds, and people who are incredibly wealthy and people who are incredibly not wealthy, and everything in between. So if we let someone into our program, are they only going to talk to the people who are just like them and just like only, help them and only talk to them? Are they going to be a jerk to the people who are not like them? So, that might start to, if we are sort of a happy community, those little micro moments of grossness can actually start to fray that sense of community. So we don't want that. So the main takeaway for the inclusivity essay. Uh, Provide a specific example of a time that you brought someone into the fold who was different, either from you, or if not, then from other people in the group. So sometimes people say, well, Maria, only the US has these issues with inclusivity, which, by the way, is bull. That's not true. Every country, humans are very good at being prejudiced. What they're prejudiced on might differ, but humans are very, very, very talented at this. So I don't tell me that your country doesn't have issues with inclusivity. Maybe you don't see it if you're in a privileged position, but I can assure you they have something somewhere where people are being made to feel like the other, or made to feel like the lesser, the less deserving, the less qualified, the less good. So the more powerful stories of this are when it's someone who was different from you, and you acknowledge that and said, oh my gosh, like I have not been taking this person seriously for a dumb reason, right? I went to college and they didn't go to college, and wow, that was actually, I thought that their ideas weren't as good as mine. But then I corrected for that, and now I brought them in. And if you don't have any stories like that, it could be a time where, let's say, you were in a group of others, and so you can really slice and dice it. The first impression when someone encounters this question is to say like, oh well, it has to be about race, religion, maybe gender, maybe LGBTQ, sexual orientation stuff, maybe. But it could be even something like maybe there was someone on your team who was neurodiverse. Maybe you had to work with someone who was autistic, or someone who was going through a mental health challenge, and that was impacting their work product. And you could have fired them, but that wouldn't have been very nice. If you did fire them, don't put that in your essay, please. That's not what we're looking for. Right? So don't just think like, oh man, I don't have any stories about that. You probably do have a story. You just might have to dig for it. But as long as you show that you're the sort of person in the past who has been able to say, this person is different and I could shun them because that is hardwired into the amygdala lizard part of my brain, or I could override that part of my brain and I could say, you know what, I'm gonna let's bring you into the fold. Those stories can be great. So within Applicant Lab, I have a whole look at all these. I put a big rectangle around all the things that have to do with the essays. So I've got a lot more advice. If these sorts of like these little slides right here, where I was like the main takeaway, I have so much more than this inside Applicant Lab. This is like the highlights, the kind of the greatest hits overview in 1 hour. But that ends my presentation. So I'm here. Tom is here to also answer any questions you might have. I know that we're doing this one at a non-standard time and a non-standard day. So if I had to guess, I'd suspect that this might be a lightly attended session, which is great. Because I normally end up spending like half an hour. I stay here answering all the questions. Oh, it's overwhelming. I know. It is overwhelming. This is not an easy process. I maybe a week or so ago, I had this an interaction with someone in my support inbox who was like, "Oh, applying to Harvard. Like, Maria, I saw all your advice for the Harvard essays, and it's too much to go through. It's just too much." And I'm trying to be nice, but my response was like, "Well, did you expect applying to Harvard Business School would be easy? Like, it's well, I think it's the best business school in the world, but fully admit that I'm biased here. It's one of the best business schools in the world. Did you expect it to be easy? It's not easy. If it were, you know what I mean? Like, of course it's hard. It should be hard. It's a good anyway. So there's a lot, and even for the more the schools that have more simple or more straightforward questions, it's still a lot of work, which is why it can be good to have like a work plan, and why maybe breaking things down into steps and putting them into an online platform called Applicant Lab. I don't know, might be something worth work. I built my product for a reason because I thought it could help people. So hopefully, if this is overwhelming, well, within the lab, you can follow through my steps, and hopefully I can help keep you organized, keep you focused. Don't get distracted with other noise out there. So yeah, so start your trial now. I will take another sip of coffee because why not? All right, I am unmuted myself. Okay, there's a question. Is there any substantial difference between a 2-year MBA and a 1-year MBA in terms of choosing career options post MBA? Great question. So 1-year MBA programs do not have a summer internship. Some of them do, right? There's sort of like the INSEAD version where you can still do an internship and you're there a little bit longer. If you are a career switcher, you will probably need a summer internship to make that switch happen. As a result, if you're applying to a 1-year program, even if you're secretly like, okay, I just need to get in. Once I get in, then I will try to switch my career. But for the purposes of the admissions essay, it's even more important that your career goal flow very naturally from where you've been so far. Because if the 1-year program does not have an internship opportunity, it's less likely that you will get that job. So that's the biggest difference, especially from the essay perspective. Okay, I might need to plug my computer in. This is embarrassing. I'm at my husband's office. Oh, here it is. Just 1 second. While I'm using this conference room, and I'm like, where are the plugs? So I'm going to answer this question that I see right now while I am plugging in. Is it okay to speak on the topic of inclusivity when you drop things on the floor, which I just did, when you were the outsider and you had to convince others in the group to let you in? Yes, absolutely. Because why is that? Well, because it shows a couple of things. It shows that you are someone. Hi, I'm back. It shows that you are someone who, at a minimum, will be empathetic to other folks who are in a similar bind in the future. So if you were someone who was excluded once, one of the best ways to develop empathy for someone else who's been excluded is when you have been excluded. It might be for a completely different reason, granted, but that's a great way to develop empathy. And so what you could do, whoever asked that question, is you could tell the story about how you won these other people over, and then at the end you could say something like, and because of this, I have a lot of empathy for other people, and so in my career, I hope to be someone who brings other people in. Okay, the next question: should I share a personal story that may sound sensitive but is meaningful for my journey? So, Mikkel, what I will tell you is that I would use the sort of, what would be a good bar that I would use here? Maybe a sort of a cocktail party, a cocktail, like, maybe let's call this, not cocktail parties, too informal. I mean, too, it's not informal, but it's, you're not close enough to the people. Maybe like a dinner party type of thing. So, would you tell, not your best friend, but would you tell friends this story about you? Right? So if you're open, if someone has, say, struggled with, I'm just going to pick something random, if someone has struggled with an eating disorder, sometimes people are like, yeah, you know what? Like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to do it. But, well, because, I'm recovering from an eating disorder. I'm recovering alcoholic, right? Like, sorry, I don't drink. If it's something like that, then I think that might be a good litmus test. If it is something that is very, how's my here, you know what? Let me summarize my answer first. Yes, it can be okay to talk about something very personal, even if it was something very painful or traumatic. But I would caution against the TMI, too much information, right? What I would advise is, if we're talking about something that's very painful that happened to you, or something like I don't know, uh, a drunk driving, I don't know, whatever it is. I'm imagining a million scenarios. If you're going to talk about it, I suggest talking about it in a very matter of fact way. Don't try to get a bunch of pity points for, like, I look at how sad my life has been. You can just say, like, look, I grew up with an alcoholic father. My mother was in and out of prison, so I was raised in the foster care system, and here's how it made me a stronger person. Instead of, like, I wept quietly in my bedroom. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's okay to talk about something very sensitive, but keep in mind that they are really nice people, the admissions officers, but they're not therapists. So, for example, if you were a victim of abuse as a child, maybe you don't have to go into the details of what that abuse was. I think it's fine to just say, like, I grew up in an abusive environment, and that's why I left home at 15, or what. You know what I'm saying? So yes, you can talk about it, but it's not meant to be a therapy session. It's meant to be, you can say, because of this, then that, but just use your judgment. Yeah, and I think maybe like the dinner party with friends is a good way to put it. Like, you probably wouldn't go into all the details of all the different types of ways that you, right, but you would say, like, oh, actually, yeah, I actually had an abusive parent growing up, and it was really hard, right? Whatever that thing might have been. So that's how I would I hope that helps. um Greatness is question is, how can I strengthen my personal statement as an applicant right after undergrad to a top business school? Okay, greatness. So greatness, you should be applying to something called the deferred programs, at least in the US. These are if you're currently a college senior, many of the US programs, and actually now some of the European programs, are starting to offer something called the deferred program. That is a special program where you specifically apply as a senior in college. If your question is, if you just graduated from college and therefore you're not eligible for a deferred admission and you're applying to business school this year, my answer is don't, because you probably will not get accepted. And so if you were listening to this whole presentation and you're like, wow, I don't have a whole lot of these stories because I'm only 1 year out of college, I haven't really led teams yet, I haven't really done, that's a sign to you that maybe it's too early to apply. Most people who are only 1 year out of college do not get accepted, at least not to the top business schools. I'm sure you can find some some money mill out there that will happily take your $200,000 and give you an MBA, but how useful that degree would be is anyone's guess. So I would advise you, greatness, to not apply, because I think you might be wasting your time. Who are the people who apply who get in with 1 year of experience? It's not very common, but they are usually people who either started their own business, let's say during college, and now that business is big and successful, um, or they work for a family business. And let's say, like, oh yeah, like I'm only a year out of college, but my parents have this business and I worked for it. Been working for it part time throughout my college years. And today, I've only been out for a year, but whoo, I took over the strategy group and we merged with another competitor and I helped increase sales and I did all this stuff, right? So it's not that you have to have multiple years of experience. You can have fewer years of experience, but what you can't escape is the need to have leadership stuff under your belt. How you got that leadership? Yeah, there is openness there. Yeah, can someone get in with only 1 year of experience? Yes, it's possible. Um, but that the leniency, they're not going to be like, well, this seems like someone who might be great in a few years. Also, by the way, keep in mind again, the recruiters. When recruiters come to campus, by the way, so the reason the people who get in with only 1 year of experience, it's not just because if they have like their own business or family business, it's not just because they've had the opportunities to have exceptional levels of leadership at a young age because of that, but it's also because they're probably going to go back to their business or the family business after graduation. They will not have to worry about the recruiters, right? A McKinsey recruiter comes to campus, they are expecting someone with about 5 years of experience. They're not going to pay. If someone has 1 year of experience and it's really only like low level, like the typical 1 year of experience out of college, McKinsey's not going to hire you. So if I know that the recruiters are not going to hire someone with only 1 year of experience, I'm not going to let that person into my program, right? Ha ha, the stakeholders thing. It was actually useful after all. Yay. Um, okay. The next question. Uh, is the transition from a government sector to the corporate sector by an MBA degree a wise decision? How would you advise on this transition? So, it is a wise decision. Yes. It is not an easy transition to make, however. What you'll have to do, Sagnick, in your applications is you're going to have to prove a couple of things. Primarily in the leadership essay, that even though you've been in the private sector, sorry, even though you've been in the public sector, you have had leadership opportunities that private sector employees will find useful. This can be difficult because oftentimes government jobs are so regimented, so hierarchical, so bureaucratic that it can actually be very difficult to show leadership because you're simply not given it. If you say, "Hey, why don't we do things this way?" The government people will say, "Shut up, that's not your job." Versus in a company, private sector company, it's usually easier to make that kind of a change. So it can be very difficult. I would say though, if you are interested, I sort of a hack here is the MPA. By that, I mean the Master's in Public Administration. Something that a lot of folks out there don't realize. If you go to, say, the website for the Harvard Kennedy School, right? That's like Harvard's, it's their public policy school, not their business school. If you go to their career services website, you will see a shockingly high number of people who get private sector jobs after the MPA. So if you want to work in something like for a bank or for a management consulting company, it will be easier for you to get accepted to the MPA. So I have this conversation sometimes with people and they're like, yeah, but you don't understand me. I don't want to study the MPA. I want to study what's in the MBA. And I'm like, that's great. I want to be George Clooney's wife. But that doesn't mean that we get everything. No offense, Tony. My husband's in the next room. I love you. You know what I mean? But like that's great. Like people are like, but you don't understand, Maria. I want to go to Harvard. And I'm like, cool, but there's also like reality. And so if you're not going to get in, so what I would advise some people from the private sectors, yes, apply to some of the business schools, but hedge your bets a little. Also apply to the public policy programs because it's going to be easier for you to get in. For hopefully it's obvious why. And then once you're there, McKinsey recruits at the Kennedy School. Goldman Sachs recruits at the Kennedy School. It might be for more like, interest rate, foreign currency exchange policy. It might be a little bit slightly different roles, but they recruit. So keep that in mind as a potential way to go. All right, the next question, Cliff Makanda. Do you have any advice for the Stanford What Matters Most to You essay? Cliff, I have so much advice. I have so much advice in applicant lab. Um, I have it's a big it's as you can imagine, it's a really big one because it's a complicated question, right? So there are some if you sign up for applicant lab, you'll see for some of like say the INSEAD questions that are very basic, like describe your career since you graduated from college until today. All right. Honestly, I don't have a ton of advice for that because it's a pretty straightforward, pretty simple question, right? For the very simple questions, I'm not going to waste your time by trying to dissect and make a mountain out of a molehill. Like, just answer the question. I'll give you a few guidance tips, but it's a very obvious question. What matters most is the opposite. What matters most is the exact opposite of a straightforward question. And for that reason, there is a lot. I got a lot. I have entire videos on like thought exercises that you can do. If you are trying to figure out what is it that matters most to me, I have an entire video on, okay, I don't know, Maria, I don't know what matters most to me. Where do I even start? I got you covered, man. I have a video on how to think about that. I have a video for I don't actually care what matters most to me. I just want to make the most of this essay. I also have a pragmatic version of the question. Um, I think the what I would say if I had I'll give one summary tip. My one summary tip is what matters most to you must be something that has evidence, concrete evidence behind it. I will often read essays for what matters most where someone will say, "What matters most to me is living an authentic life of supporting others and making sure that others can be their genuine selves around me." Right? Some lofty language that looks like it belongs on a poster. Oh, like if you're at a corporation that doesn't have pictures of Tom Cruise behind you, but if it instead has like those motivational posters, like with the eagles flying through the air. If you're making a statement like that, that sounds like it belongs on a motivational poster, that's great. But what have you done to show that that's who you are? What people tend to forget about is that they think that the what matters most, the what in what matters most is what matters most to the reader. That's not true. You could say whatever you want matters most, but it's what comes after that. Or maybe it depends on where in the essay you state the what matters most. But I mean, it's the substance of proving that this is the sort of person you are. So don't worry so much about the what. Honestly, the best way to write this essay is to write out your examples first, take a step back, and then say, okay, based on the examples that I've given here, what is a cohesive theme that ties them together? And then you say, that's what matters most. That's the easiest way to do it. But you gotta have evidence. You have to have you can't just write paragraphs and paragraphs about like, I believe that all people are magical unicorns and we should all get along and I'm the sort of person who believes in equality and just great. I love it. I love equality and justice. I love authenticity. Whatever it is that matters most to you, I also love very much. What I don't love is when people just write these big, you know, society needs to change and I want to be the person who great. What have you done so far to change society? Anything? So make sure that you have concrete examples from your life of stuff you've done. Okay. I clapped to try to, I don't know if you can hear that. Okay. Sagnix got another question. How importantly do the schools consider the GPA? What are the avenues to compensate for a low GPA? So, of course, the GPA is considered. That's why they ask for it. However, of all of the elements of the application, it's the easiest one to have forgiven. And the reason for that is that every college is different, every major is different, there's so many different variations. So be aware of the fact that not all GPAs are created equal. So when you see that like the top business schools have an average GPA of 3.7, that's not because every person in the class is a 3.7. It's because you have your history majors and your English literature majors who then went to work on Wall Street after their liberal arts degrees who had 4.0s. And then you've got the neuroscience majors or the physics, quantum physics engineering badass, the hardcore engineering stuff who have the 3.4 or the 3.3. Um, and so those sort of average out. I mean, actually, they don't average. But if you sort of look at the proportions of the students, anyway, it becomes a weighted average. So just keep in mind that that 3.7 or whatever number that is a weighted average across people who studied really easy stuff at really easy universities and people who studied really hard things. So first of all, there's that element of it. Number two, because there's no standardization between colleges, how am I supposed to know if someone who went to BITS Pilani, like the electrical engineering thing at BITS Pilani, how does that compare with a psychology major from Arizona State? Like, whoa, how am I supposed to compare them? I don't have to. The standardized way to have a standard view of everyone's academic potential is called the standardized tests. That is why schools have standardized tests. Because I don't know the details of your major at your college in your part of the world. And I don't know how to compare that with someone who, was an agriculture major at Nebraska State, but I have the standardized test. That's one data point that helps me compare people from all over the world who majored in all kinds of random stuff. That's a standardized test. And so my answer to you is the number one way to make up for a low GPA is to do very well on the standardized test. The worse your GPA was, the higher you're going to want that standardized test score to be because they balance each other out. Also, there is an essay that almost pretty much every school um, offers, and that is called the optional essay. As with many essays, there are different ways of wording the optional essay. So just because if you go and you're like, I actually had someone yesterday complain, like, you don't have advice for the Kellogg optional essay. And I'm like, I do. It's just, it had different wording. They called it something like, is there something we should be aware of? I don't remember the exact, but I'm like, no, it's there. It's there. It's just, it has different wording. Every school has an optional essay, even if they call it something different. That is where you can explain something like, look, I chose to major in chemical engineering, even though it was really hard, and I knew I wouldn't do well because of X. Or I was working during college, and because I had to work 15 hours a week to support my education, my grades weren't as great as they would. Like, you can explain, if there was sort of an explanation for those grades, you get a chance to explain it. So you get your test score and you get your explanation. The third thing, and people talk about this, but I don't think it helps a little, but I don't think it moves the needle quite as much as people think it does. At least certainly not at the very, very tippy top schools. I think as you start, getting less snooty, the less snooty schools are more open to this. But if you show, for example, if you take like a calculus class and an accredited institution, I don't mean Coursera for free where it's not run by a university. I mean, like, it has to be something by if you're applying to a school in the US, it has to be a US accredited college. It can be online, obviously. But like an online calculus class from, I'm making up, Indiana University, I don't know, Purdue University online, whatever, some sort of, if it's an accredited US university and you take the calculus class now to make up for the bad calculus grade you got in college, that can help too. I don't think it moves the needle. Sometimes, look, if you've already taken the standardized test three times, studies show that most people do not improve after the third time, if all else is equal, right? If you didn't study it all the first time, if you didn't study it all the first three times, and then you study a lot, then it makes sense to take it the fourth time, right? But assuming all else is equal, assuming that you've been studying hard and you've been taking it seriously, after the second or third time, most people don't improve, which, by the way, is a testament to the test being a good test, right? It being well, I keep getting the same score over and over again. Well, good. It shows that the test works. So if somebody has already taken the test three times and it ain't going to get any higher, then yes, sign up for the calculus class or the other classes, the MBA math or whatever, HBX core. I would say though, for HBX core, if you're aiming for a top school, only sign up for HBX core if you're planning on doing very, very, very well in it. So that way you get the whatever their version of honors is. Okay, so that's my next. Okay, hopefully that answered your question. Okay, next question, Suyash. With the number of applicants increasing every year, what are the chances of the next wave of applicants becoming an admissions consultant is your post-MBA goal? Yeah, spoiler alert. I did not say that becoming an MBA admissions consultant. I don't think any of us go to business school with this being our goal. This is something I started volunteering with the admissions office at HBS, and I met a lot of people that way. And then even after I graduated, I had a day job. I was working in product management for mobile technology apps developer startup after business school. But people were just sending me like, "Hey, you helped me get into Kellogg 2 years ago. I met you when you were volunteering through admissions at HBS, like, you helped me, so now my sister's applying, help her," and that's how I got started with this. And then I felt really passionately about helping people, and I felt really passionately that the cost, the understandably high cost of other admissions, services was too high, and I decided to do something about it, and I did. I built Applicant Lab. But thank you. Yes, don't say that you want to become an admissions consultant. Okay. Okay, so I'm scrolling down. Do you recommend any courses for those with a low GMAT GRE score? Where else in the application can one focus to show their quant proficiency? Um, so I don't know if you're asking if the question about the low any courses for those with a low score. If you're asking for courses, prep courses, I will defer to my good friends at GMAT Club, who, by the way, they're not just about GMAT, they are also very good at GRE stuff. So I will defer to them for test prep courses. If your question is courses to try to counterbalance that narrative, um, yeah, I think online from an accredited institution again. Like I feel bad for the people who do the Coursera things, but put yourself in their shoes. Someone does a Coursera, they're like, I did a Coursera class in calculus. Great. Did you get a grade? Well, no. Okay, so how do I know that you even learned it? Right? You didn't just like click go like next, next, next while you were watching a video on your phone, right? Like it has to have a grade and it has to be from a real university. You don't have to pay a ton of money. It doesn't have to be a super expensive university, but it does have to be an online class from a university. Usually, calculus is the first kind of sticking point, which is interesting because I didn't really use calculus in business. But anyway, it's not because you're going to use calculus in business school necessarily. It's more because calculus is considered to be hard. So if you can handle it and do well in it, then it shows that your brain can bounce around these quantitative concepts more easily. You could also try to take maybe a finance class. Berkeley actually has an online class it's called business math or math for managers or something. It's literally like a semester long class online virtual that is like, here are the key concepts you'll need to know for business school, for example. So that could be one to get into because they cover a lot of things, and that's a well-known class that a lot of admissions officers are familiar with. Um, Moving on, Cliff Macondo. What is the best approach for the explanation essay? Cliff, I'm going to need you to explain I need an explanation for your question. What do you mean by the explanation essay? I need an explanation. I will give you a moment to type, and while you're doing that, I will take advantage. I don't know, Cliff, did we lose you? We might have lost Cliff. Cliff, I'm not avoiding your question. I just don't understand it. I'm sorry. What is the best approach for the explanation essay? Explanation. What could Cliff have meant by that? Explanation. Like explaining why you want to get an MBA? I don't know. I'm sorry, Cliff. I can't. Oh, a bad grade during. Oh, okay. That got it. The best approach is I not surprisingly I've got advice for the optional essay also in the lab, but you're just going to want to explain what happened. I mean, honestly, this is one of those straightforward ones. This is one where I don't have 15 videos. This is one where it's just a couple of bullet points. Just explain what happened. And also, there are other little things you can do, like you can try to also provide proof, counter proof. Like, okay, you might think, not that you would phrase it this way, obviously, but the message that you're conveying is like, look, you might be worried because I got a D in organic chemistry my sophomore year, but here's why it happened. I was working. I had a family member who was ill. I broke my ankle and I couldn't go to class, whatever it is. And then if you have any counter counterbalancing evidence that you are good at, say, quant, because the quant stuff is the stuff that matters more to them. So the grades in quant will be especially looked at. In fact, I think I'll have to I'll have to look at I'll have to look at the MIT application again. But I think MIT actually specifically asks in their application, like, did you take calculus in college? What grade did you get? Did you take linear algebra in college? What grade did you get? So they don't say, did you take history in college? If so, what grade did you get in your comparative literature studies? Like, interestingly enough, they don't ask about that. So the emphasis should be on your quant abilities. So if you got a bad grade, explain why it is. I have something called the silver lining technique in the lab that can also be helpful. And then also, then say, like, however, like, in my job, I am constantly building discounted cash flow models, and I'm using statistical analyses to try to project future cash flows. And I'm right. So, like, you can say, like, even though I did badly in this one quant class, like, it hasn't held me back. And look at how you can see that I'm good at quant because of X and Y and Z. And then this is where the cherry on top is, of course, to say, and that's why, please refer to my 95th percentile score on the GRE quant as evidence. Right? You can't. It's hard to argue. That's the beauty of. Everyone hates the standardized tests, but I actually think they're beautiful because they give those of us out there who maybe had tumultuous college years, people who have degrees from universities that might not be as fancy. Whatever it is, the standardized test is a great equalizer. And that's where you can, instead of being like, well, I want you to trust me when I say that I'm good with numbers, that's not really going to fly. But what flies is I have a standardized test, and here's how well I did. Boom. Okay. Arga Gupta, please help me with the A to Z of deferred MBA applications for admission. Arga, we don't have time for that here, but basically start looking into it. If you are a senior in college and you literally like Google like deferred MBA programs, a lot of people, Darden, HBS, Stanford, Booth, off the top of my head, are the ones that's not an exhaustive list. A lot of schools offer them. Okay. What is the round two school selection strategy that you recommend? Round one, dream schools. Round two, safe schools. So you're not going to like my answer. So yes, my answer is to do both dream schools and safe schools in round one if you can. But you're like, that's not what I asked. I know. The ideal though is to try to get as many applications as you can. But I know that we live in the real world, and in the real world, you might not be able to do that. So in the real world, do your dream applications in round one and not round two. Because if we think about it, almost think about it like as like a grid of outcomes, right? There's like dream school, accept, deny, safer school, accept, deny. If you apply to all of the programs in round one, you're going to know by December what those results are. And that'll either tell you, whew, I got in, yes, right? If you get into everything, I got in, I'm done. If you don't get in anywhere, even into your quote unquote safe schools, now you realize like, oh no, I need to apply to even safer schools, right? Maybe my candidacy wasn't quite as strong as I thought it was. And then if you do that by round one, that then gives you the chance to cast an even wider net for round two and then enroll next year. That's the danger of not even getting in any of your safe school, is that if you don't get into the dream schools in round one, you're like, oh, well, I knew I didn't have a really good chance at those anyway. So no problem. On to my more realistic schools for round two. But what if even those schools are hard to get into and you don't get in any of those? Now you're going to have to wait a whole other year for the cycle to repeat again. So hopefully I've convinced you to try to submit applications to as many schools as you can in round one. But the reason I say to do it harder schools in round one versus the other way around. Let's say you apply to the safety schools in round one, and the result is positive. You get into all of them. Great. I've got that under my belt. It is ready to go. And now I feel confident. If I got into these schools, maybe I can get into these schools. So now you're confident and you're excited and you apply to round one schools and you're so excited. And then your round two, your dream schools in round two, I should say. You apply to those. But then the deposit for the round one, the deadline deposit, some schools have low deadlines, so relatively low deposits, right? Just $1,000 to hold your spot. $4,000, $3,000, $1,000. Some of the other schools, like the Cambridge and Oxfords, or both, or some of the UK schools have a €9,000 deposit. That's a lot of money to spend on a deposit for a school that you may or may not enroll in. However, you're not going to know. The deposit deadline for round one is always prior to you knowing how well you're doing in round two. That's on purpose, guys. I'm sorry. There is no, from a cash flow management perspective, there is no reason for a university with $1 billion endowment. They don't need your $2,000 right now. But part of why they do this, I think, is because they know that you're probably applying to other schools, right? And so they're like, okay, at least I can get your money. I can get a little bit of, I'm not going to get the whole $200,000, but I can get some money from this person in the meantime. So this happens every year where someone's like, oh no, I got into some great schools round one. I just applied round two, but the deposit deadline for round one is in February. Let's say early February. You're not even going to know at that point if you got interview invites to your round two schools. So what do? Do I pay the $2,000 and hold my spot, or do I risk it? And the problem with that is that because by definition, the harder schools are harder to get into, if you risk it and don't pay the deposit, you might end up with nothing. Right? So that's why if you have to do it that way, do the dream schools in round one, because then you might not even need to bother with the safer schools in round two, if you're lucky. But just realize that you might need to pony up some money to hold that spot. Okay, Mikkel is back. Does the redundancy of achievements downgrade the quality of the application leadership quality? For example, if the achievement is stated in the CV are the same as those in the essays? So Mikkel, great question. This is why the essays exist. If the resume's explanation of an achievement were sufficient for me to get a sense of how you accomplish something, I would not waste my time asking for an essay. Right? I have things to do too. Isn't it like, why would an admissions office spend their time asking you to write and for me to read a leadership essay if the resume alone were sufficient to convey all of the information I need to know? So if we think back to my presentation where I said like the big takeaways for the leadership essay, one of them is talk about how you did it. There's no room in an essay to talk about how you did something on an interpersonal level. I'm sorry, there's no room on a resume, I should say. There's no room on a resume to talk about how you did something on an interpersonal level. That's where the essays come in. That's why the essays exist. That's exactly what they want to know, the type of leader you are. Are you a leader? And then what type of leader are you? Because some people, at least earlier in their careers, can get away with being the screamy type of leader, the bullying, the intimidating type of leader, the leader who gets other people to do stuff because you put them down and you make them feel bad about themselves. That's not sustainable in the long term, though. So that's why they want to know in the leadership essay. If the leadership essay is, you don't want to copy and paste from the resume into the essay. I have so many videos. I have an entire video called "The Story Behind the Bullet Point" in Applicant Lab, and I focus it right now. I focus it primarily on the Stanford and HBS applications because those are the ones that are, as you might imagine, the most focused on leadership. But yeah, the achievement alone doesn't get anyone in. It's how you did it. And that's why they ask an essay. That's why you get 200 words to tell them how you did it. Huzzah. Okay, I think those are all of our questions. And so if we're done, I think I'm done too. So thank you so much, everyone. Yes, please hit the like button. I never know what side. Sometimes it flips, I think it might be on this side, wherever it is. Like the like button, smash that like button. And please do check out applicantlab.com. If you found my way of explaining things here useful, there's a whole lot more where that came from, and it costs less than what you would have to pay someone like me for even an hour of your time. So please do check it out and have a great rest of your day. Tom Maverick says good luck. All right, bye.